Hi everyone, I hope I am audible.
Yes.
Good evening everyone. On behalf of BioRich, I warmly welcome you all to today's Biotalk session. Biotalk is our initiative to bring biology beyond textbooks by creating a space where ideas, research, and real world science come together. Through these sessions, we aim to spark curiosity, encourage scientific thinking, and build a scientific community that actively engages with science and nature. Today's session is titled Galapagos Islands and the Story of Evolution. The Galapagos Islands hold a unique place in the history of science. Their remarkable biodiversity provides most ideas in evolution biology, particularly Charles Darwin's theory of evolution by natural selection. In this session, we will explore the island's extraordinary wildlife, their ecological significance, and how they transformed our understanding of life's diversity on Earth. We are delighted to have Mr. Saurav Mahajan, a citizen scientist and teacher at Oakridge International School with us today, passionate about biodiversity, evolution, and science communication. He will guide us through this fascinating journey into one of the world's most iconic natural laboratories. We look forward to learning from his knowledge and experience, and I am confident that today's session will be both informative and inspiring for all of us. So, without further delay, I invite Mr. Saurav Mahajan to lead today's session. Over to you, sir.
Thank you so much for giving the opportunity, Barracks, for this wonderful session. And I hope I can give some light on evolution and its theory. And especially the Galapagos Island, as you rightly pointed it out, that it's so biodiverse. What makes it biodiverse is furthermore interesting. So I'll start the session by sharing my screen.
Yes, sir, it's visible.
Are the slides also visible? The PowerPoint?
Yes, 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 yes.
Okay, okay. So, I mean, there's a question which I'll start with, that evolution, is it just a theory or it's a fact? Or how did we get into the concept of this evolution, right? In many of the countries, many people, they don't believe in evolution, to be frank. And in classrooms also, some science teacher would not like to discuss about evolution in detail, because the concept of religion and science, always there is a tussle between them. And evolution is something which is very factual, logical, and there are uncertainties in evolution, which we'll see in this particular lecture. So without further ado, let's start with first. I'll start with the Galapagos Island. I mean, how it emerged out of nowhere, right? And then, based on Galapagos Island, one of the famous, scientist, Darwin, who actually, observed something in that island while his voyage, and then gave the natural selection theory. So let's get into it. So as you can see, that's the Galapagos Island, very volatile island, I must say, because most of the time it's have very active volcanoes, right? And those active volcano, it exclude a lot of different substances from inside of the earth, especially rich in nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium. All those nutrients are coming from the seabed, and then it is evolving. It is still evolving. I mean those islands. And if I say Galapagos Island, it's just not a single mainland or island. It has small islands in them, of around 8 to 9 islands, togetherly comprising this Galapagos Island. So let's talk about what's the meaning of Galapagos. So, and as it is a Spanish word, it derived from the Spanish word horse saddle, right? And the name of the island is because of the tortoise. There were a lot of tortoise over there first. The Spanish invaders who first visited this island, and then they give this name as Galapagos because they found a huge tortoise. As you can see here, they are not typical tortoise which we see, but the neck of those tortoise are extremely long. And then based on that, this massive creatures, they give the name as Galapagos in 1535. If you look into Darwin actually explored this island in 1835. So before that, before Darwin's voyage, already some Spanish, Spanish people who have already went there and look around into the island. So if you look into the geographical location of Galapagos, it's near to Ecuador, which is in South America. Near to Ecuador, you have around 1,000 kilometer distance between the Ecuador and Galapagos Island in the Pacific Ocean, which it emerged with the period of time. As you can see there, around 1,000 kilometers distance of this Galapagos island with Ecuador. So probably the theory might be that if you look into the Pangea, a small bit of portion, you might think that it may be arising from the Ecuador, but it's not the case. It's actually the active volcano from the seabed, which actually produce a lot of inorganic material from the bed, which made the Galapagos island, rather than bifurcating or dividing from the Ecuador. It's not the case. So yeah, you can see some of the Galapagos Island here. The major one is the Isabella Island there. Then you have Fernandina, then Santa Cruz, and then San Diego. These are all different islands, and the biodiversity also is very enriching in all of the places. And an interesting part is that if some of the organisms you can only observe in Isabella Island, but not in the Santa Cruz. Santa Cruz have different type of birds which are not there in the Isabella. So why those kind of variation actually emerge, that also we will try to explore in this lecture. So let's talk about key features of Galapagos Island. So probably, as I have pointed it out, that when the metal, from the seabed, from the seabed, when the magma, which was actually arising from the seabed, it start depositing there, right? Because from the magma, a lot of rocks also it was emerged, and those rocks, when they start settling over there over the period of time, then these Galapagos Islands was created. Okay, that's what the first thing. Second, the I mean, out of nowhere, how can the life emerge, right, in this Galapagos Island? That's again an interesting story. So if you look into the nutrient which are coming out in the sea, right, those nutrients are also into the water, aquatic systems. So a lot of aquatic plants and aquatic animals are being migrated from different places because it was well enriching place. So that makes this a hotspot for biodiversity, because the migratory birds, the seawater creatures, they want food, they want something to stay where the foods are enriched, right? The ample amount of food. So they are moving from different places, and then started moving and creating a kind of food web into this kind of islands, right? And that's how the life actually started in the Galapagos Island. And of course, the Charles Darwin, who actually explored this Galapagos Island in 1835, 1831 to 1836, where his Beagle voyage, he explored a lot of different type of species of birds, different type of plant species, and then insects, reptiles, and specifically the tortoise, which already the Spanish invaders have already seen those. So it was quite an enriching experience for Darwin, and a hub for nature lovers specifically. So he noted down all those observations, and as we all know that he has written a book called as Origin of Species, where he have actually sketched all those things which he have observed. So let's talk about one more feature. So you can see there in the Galapagos Island, so many different type of organisms taken. One interesting thing is that you may see different type of birds, reptiles, tortoise, and then shark, okay, but mammal you will not see here. Okay, so there is no mammals in this Galapagos island. Okay, like a leopard or probably a bear. Why is that? That also an interesting thing, because all these organisms can actually move across, to different places. But leopard, in the sense, you cannot evolve a leopard from a particular island where they don't have any sources of food for them, right? Because they are very small organisms. That's the first thing. A second thing, mammals, to from the Ecuador to which is the mainland, Ecuador to the Galapagos Island, it's 1,000 kilometer distance. So how any mammal can even crossing 1,000 kilometers to reach over there for just for exploration, except the humans. So because of that, we don't see any kind of mammals over there. Yeah, another thing, that why so much of volcanic eruptions there in Galapagos Islands. The primary reason is that we are having 11 plates. That the plates are the one when it shifts from one place to other, when they have friction among them, that creates instability in a particular places. And one of the plate in the Galapagos Island, it comes under Nazca plate. Okay, so this Nazca plate is also moving with the what you call the mainland, and because of this friction geographically, there are a lot of activities which are happening, and because of that, the volcanic eruptions are very common in Galapagos Island, which makes it a very hotspot place for active geographical events as well as the biodiversity, so both of them. Yeah, so I have already mentioned about it, that why Galapagos Islands are so rich. This is the picture of iguana, a very and interesting part of this organism is that you see reptiles are primarily carnivorous organisms, right? But you will see a different kind of reptile. Iguana is a reptile. This is iguana, so reptile. But this reptile is primarily vegetarian. I mean, in the beginning, it was partially carnivorous, but during the course of time, it becomes completely vegetarian on the meal of algae. They eat algae, and the colors which you can see in its body is because of the it can synthesize some of the chemicals with the nutrition of the algae. And those algae are also very colorful, so they can metabolize those colors, and then they can give this kind of shades in their body, primarily for mating. So more colorful, that in the animal world, the color is a significant part of reproductive success. So this is one. And so, yeah, so another interesting thing, that yes, nutrients are evolving, from the volcanic eruptions, but there is another important phenomenon which is happening, which makes this island extremely rich. So you see there are some currents which are running, right? One is Cromwell countercurrent, Humboldt current. This blue line, which are you can see this wind or the current, it's actually the cold wave currents which are coming into the islands. Okay, due to the rotation of the earth. So I won't be going into the detail of the geographical mechanism by which how these currents are forming, but this Humboldt and the Cromwell currents are primarily the cold currents, and from Panama current is hot current, so hot air currents. So during the mixing of the hot and the cold currents, what happens is that the colder currents which are there in the underground, means in the seabed, is actually want to come up, right? So cold currents are moving up, and the hot current, they're replacing the hot currents. So if you look into this particular picture, you'll have some interesting thing which is called as upwelling of the nutrients. So the cold currents is actually bringing the nutrients from the seabed, and then it is moving upward, which is also called as upwelling, as you can see here. The warmer surface is moving, and the deeper, colder, nutrient-rich area, it is actually moving up, which actually makes a very interesting thing, because it creates a kind of food web explosion, because this currents and the volcanic eruptions creating the rich nutrients, which makes all these creatures to come over there. As you can see, some of them I have just listed out there. I will also show some pictures, and because of that, the biodiversity becomes so richly biodiverse place. And why this matter to Darwin? Why Galapagos is always associated to Darwin? Because when he actually moved into the different islands, he saw different kind of species, right? And then the closely related species like the finches have some kind of variations. So while moving from one island, small island to other, why this variation are caused, what makes the nature to cause this kind of variation, he was very fascinated over this. So because of that, the Darwin has proposed the uh, a natural selection, which we'll be talking about. So simple analogy, you can think Galapagos as a group of volcanic islands, right? And then it's a deep oceanic conveyor belt that continuously delivers the nutrient-rich fertilizers from the deep sea into the surface, so that the organisms who are living mostly in the surface area can get those nutrients and then settle over there, and creating the most productive ecosystem on Earth. Yeah, so I would now, after this, I would like to show you some of the pictures of some of the biodiversity there in the island, which are the special kind of creatures living in that island. So you can see marine iguanas, which are there, right, as I have mentioned. Then you have lava lizards. Then razor snakes. So they venomous, yes, weakly venomous, but they do strangle the prey and then they kill them. And yes, Lonesome George, tortoise, which was famous till 2012, Galapagos tortoise, which we see. But after 2012, that the concept of invasive species like goats, which came into the island, they have finished every single, grasses in the island. And because of that, this was the Lonesome George, which was got extinct in 2012. So we don't see any kind of this, Galapagos tortoise now in the island, which is very unfortunate. And how does the goat reach? Now, a goat is again a mammal, but the primarily, shifting of the goats is because of the humans who wanted to settle over there. So human brought the ship goats there, and then goat became the invasive species so much that the Galapagos tortoise are no more. Then you have mockingbird there, American flamingo. There is saltish and brackish water there. They are migrating from the mainland, and then you can get to see even the flamingo over there. Then cormorant. Now, cormorant is something which can fly and catch fish very quickly, right? But in this island, you will see that the cormorant are completely flightless. Now, you would be thinking, why is that? Because the sea adaptation and natural selection, it made so much of impact that the in the seawater there is enough amount of fishes, so they don't have to fly anywhere. So over the period of time, what happened? This cormorant became flightless. Okay, so they do have a rudimentary wings, as you can see, but they don't fly. They just literally go into the across the sea, and then they capture the fishes. Then this one, magnificent frigate bird, you will see there. And why? What is this pouch which is coming from the neck region? Okay, it's actually kind of attracting the for the mating. It actually produces colorful pouch which inflates so that the females are getting attracted. Okay, so the male only have this pouch, colorful pouch. And yes, you have Galapagos penguins also there, small penguins. And then this particular bird called as vermilion flycatcher, it is now vulnerable in the island because it does not get enough amount of food over there. So there's a literally shortage of food resources for this particular bird. So in 2000, I think 16, it was considered as extinct bird, but again in 2021 and 23 report, again they saw some of the birds which are there. So again it becomes in the vulnerable status of conservation. They are literally doing the conservation for this bird. And yes, you have sea lions, and then sperm whale, orca, bottlenose dolphin. They are migrating from a great place, for the breeding purpose or for the food purpose. Basically, most of them come for the food. So they come over for a long distance, and then they wait for some period of time, and then they move. You have sea turtles. The primary problem with the Galapagos Island is because of the polluted water there. In the tourism, this particular sea turtles are also in the danger condition. So that's one. And then you have this lightfoot crab over there, which is very, magnificent in looking. They can hop, they can climb the lava rocks, right? So quite again magnificent feature. So these are all about what in the Galapagos you will see if you visit ever in Galapagos. These are the biodiversity you may see. Now, coming to about this biodiversity place, one particular person who actually visited and made a book out of this Galapagos Island after the observation was Darwin. So let's look into the journey of Darwin, that what made him to travel in this particular island and how did he discover even this island. So yeah, in 1831, the voyage of Beagle, which started, and this voyage of Beagle was actually in the England. They wanted a naturalist. Okay, it was the second voyage actually, and they wanted a naturalist. So they put pamphlet all across England. And Charles Darwin, as usual from the childhood, he was so interested in getting the nature observation that in without giving a second thought, he actually went ahead with this particular voyage. So the voyage was around from 1831 to 1836, around 5 years of journey throughout the world. He wanted to explore more. So let's begin the theory of Darwin's evolutionary theory. So I wanted to show you with a cartoon that what exactly, if you look into the childhood of Darwin. Darwin was very fascinated with particularly beetles, right? So he used to collect beetles, and then he used to do a lot of different kind of studies with respect to the wings, their antennas, how they derive the nutrition from the surroundings. And then his father, of course, Robert Darwin, he was dead against Charles Darwin. Why is that? Because Robert Darwin at that time is a very famous medical expert, you can say the doctor over there in the Edinburgh, and he wanted that legacy to continue with his son Charles Darwin. But Charles Darwin was not so interested in the human anatomy or medical sciences. Okay, but he was more often interested into the observation of the nature. So Robert Darwin was absolutely saying that he's not going to do anything in life, right? That is the kind of impression of Robert Darwin to Charles Darwin. But Charles Darwin, if you look into the great grandfather of Charles Darwin, Erasmus Darwin, so he was very interested in this nature studies. So he was much more inspired by his grandfather rather than his father, right? So you can see there's a gap of generation where he can continue that study. Yeah, so this is the voyage. You can see here that he started his journey from Plymouth, from England, and then he went across in the South America, right? And while moving into the South America, he found that the one of the place called as Galapagos. There he did all his observations. Yeah, he was very fascinated about whatever the creatures he saw. Not only the creatures, the living creatures, but he also found some fossilized rocks there. And it made him so interested that what might be the evolution, what would have happened billions of years ago in this island, that this kind of strange creatures was fossilized, right? And iguana, you can see that he was told is that restrict observation leads to what his building of the concepts and building of this theory called as natural selection. So primary three major events why Darwin, how Darwin gave this natural selection, what made him to give this natural selection. So first is observation. Yes, during the voyage, he see a lot of observation like organism varies place to place, right, in the island. Second, closely related species, they occupy different environment, right, like we say Darwin's finches. So in the island, different islands, he has seen different type of beaks. That was one observation. And the fossils, right? So this observations was very crucial for Darwin's synthesis of natural selection. Second, uh, in the mainland or in the England, the artificial hybridization or artificial selection was already started. So I'll move ahead. I mean, observation was first, and based on that, he has written a book called as Origin of Species, where you can see the phylogenetic tree he has made. All these drawings which you see here are primarily by Darwin himself. So he was good at art, also, to make such beautiful pictures of and the observation. Yeah, the tortoise, right? Galapagos tortoise. He saw, so he sketched it, and then these beaks of the Darwin finches, right, in different islands. Yeah, so a different type of beaks he saw, and then he gave something called as adaptive radiations, that they are natural selected. If the food sources are less in one particular place, then the organisms can migrate in different places to search for the food. And over the period of time, because those foods are only meant for survival, so it made some anatomical changes to fit into that particular environment, right? Which is survival of the fittest. The primarily survival of the fittest term was not given by what he called Darwin. It was Spencer, Herbert Spencer, who has given survival of the fittest term, right? Darwin's theory was only natural selection, the natural selected. Yeah, as I was telling you, that artificial selection. So artificial selection, if you look into it, he has written one book also, like variation of domesticated animal and plants. That was also one of the book which he has written because of the breeding thing. So he was known about that farmers and the breeders, they can actually change or modify the different traits of organisms by crossbreeding them, right? And he had a question with respect to that. If humans can change the anatomy and physical features of organism by doing the breeding, is it possible that nature is also doing the same? Because nature also creates some kind of pressure, selective pressure to modify it, right? So this was one of the question in case of Darwin's mind, that can nature also create new organism because of modifications, right? And we know that this kind of modifications are happening from the time immemorial. Like, for example, wolf, from the ancestor of all the dogs which you see are primarily the wolf. Okay, from there the variation domesticated, right? They're all domesticated dogs, which are being the primary ancestors are again the wolf. And again, this wild mustard plant have, if you look into the stem, leaves, buds, they all modify to become the different kind of vegetables which we have in the market and which we are eating, right? So artificial selection is coming into the picture, that how humans, if they are changing the scenario of the what you call plants, then why not nature can do the same? Though it may take some more time, but it is also happening in the nature. And obviously, yes, Darwin was also, he has read some economic theory, for example, Malthusian theory of population, right? So whenever there is a selective pressure, I was always telling that there must be some selective pressure, right? And what was that selective pressure? Selective pressure was only about what? The shortage of food, because we know that the food or the plant products are growing arithmetically, right? But the population of any species are growing what? Geometrically. So there is some Malthusian catastrophe which is going to happen, which create that selective pressures to modify organisms because of competition, right? So we see interspecific competition, intraspecific competition. This kind of competition exists because of that the organisms they change. So he integrated that Malthusian theory of population economical theory into the field of biology. So kind of interdisciplinary, right? And yes, we should thank again Alfred Wallace. Why is that? Because Wallace, he was working in the same era of Darwin. In the Malaysia, there was some archipelago, means some islands, small islands there. And whatever he observed in those Malaysian islands was exactly replica copy of what Darwin studied over there. So Darwin, while doing his theory, he wanted to publish the paper, but Wallace, he gave a letter to him saying that that in the Malaysian island also I have observed the same kind of thing, and they have published the paper together, okay, in England, Royal Society, and it should be called it as Darwin Wallace theory, natural selection theory, because both have contributed and substantiated the fact that the natural selection is happening, right? Yeah. So, including visited there and what, how the evolution theory from his mind actually came. But remember, like it was a small 5 years of journey, right? And in that 5 years of journey, we cannot explain the whole evolutionary mechanism. It was just a part of, evolutionary theory which he contributed. But after that, genetics came into the picture, and you might be thinking there are some loopholes in the Darwin's theory as well. Like he could not explain how the variation is caused, how the life was created on this particular island. Okay, and then he was too much focused into the natural selection theory, so it was over explained, this natural selection. Later, at the contemporary side, there was one scientist called as Mendel was doing the same, based on the evolutionary theory, but in the term of genetics, genes, right, factors, right, and he gave those laws of genetics. So at the time, Mendel was not so famous figure in the scientific world, and Darwin was absolutely in a very high demand in the Royal Society because he discovered all these things. So Mendel has written one particular paper to Darwin, that I have also seen some of the how the progenies, like why cat is giving rise to cat, why dog is giving rise to cat. I have some provable mechanism to tell about this, that why the variations are caused, or why how the generations are carrying forward those traits. But unfortunately, Darwin, he has written to the Darwin, but Darwin has not, he ignored the letter. And think about this, that if the genetics component come into the paper of Darwin, it was absolutely fantastic phenomenon or the theory where Darwin can also talk about what you call how the variation was caused. Okay. Secondly, mutation, the concept of mutation by Hugo de Berries, right? So that concept was also lagging, that random kind of changes can also happen in nature due to mutation. So we'll talk about this. This is a very fascinating thing. So we'll start with the theory of evolution quickly, all right? The whole story of it. The primary question, if any, person, if it is a religious person or non-religious person or scientific person, the first thing primary comes into the picture, right? Like, where did we come from, right? The life, where did the first life came on earth, right? Do we have any answers for it, right? And primarily I would be telling that we just don't know. Okay, there are, because we don't see, there are some abigenetic theory, right, where it says that from the inorganic matter the first type of life exists, or life was created from the inorganic material, right? But there is no transition that we should get a transition between inanimate matter and see that there's a link was not the picture. So we just don't know. We have some facts, right? We are having some loop or gaps in them, and we are trying to figure this thing out, because uncertainty in science is such a beautiful thing, because if you're uncertain about something, you want to find out that why there's uncertainty. And evolution is actually progressing. It is always a progressive. One theory comes and then again theory comes. It try to substantiate that what might have happened in this billions years of life which are there on Earth, the diversified life on Earth. So primarily two hypotheses about evolution. I would stick to this two. One is called as the panspermia hypothesis, and second is called as the theory of abiogenesis. Right. The hypothesis third which we can tell that God theory, that God built all of this. But in science, if you cannot prove it, I would not consider it as even the scientific journey, right? So I would not call it as in the hypothesis any other further hypothesis, right? There are further more hypotheses are there, but I would like to stick into this too. So what exactly is panspermia hypothesis? Panspermia hypothesis says that from the outside, from the exobiology or from the outside asteroids and meteoroids, some of the life form actually traveled on into the earth, right? And then that life, it actually create all the diversified living organisms. Probably you may not believe that this may be true, okay? But recently a research came. It was in 2026. It says that in the asteroid Ryugu, okay, Japanese, they found that in the meteoroid, some of the building block of life was existing. That means the nucleotide, which you can see, the 5 DNA building blocks, they found that. So we cannot completely deny the possibility of panspermia. It might happen, and it is a recent research which happened in March this year, only in 2026. So we don't deny that. Second, theory of abiogenesis. Yes, we have seen so many experiments on it, right? The Urey, Oparin and Helden theory of abiogenesis, then Stanley and Miller substantiated. But if you look into the theory of abiogenesis, then the prebiotic synthesis, the chemicals which were there in the early Earth, right? They try to form some kind of bonding between them, and those bond causes a formation of some polymer vesicles or protocells, right? And Craig Venter, I think he made the first artificial cell also in the lab, right? Craig Venter, 2000, I think 2010, he created, but again, very rudimentary. It has only the property of, I think, self-replication, nothing else. And then from the protocells, the first, last universal common ancestors we got, we still don't know who was it. So that is why you can see that the question mark, what it looks like, we don't have any idea. And from that Yucca, the concept of all the different diversified organisms comes into the picture. So that's theory of abiogenesis, right? So yeah, Miller and Urey, you know that these are uh, uh, this particular picture or the experiment was given a credential point that if we give some kind of atmospheric gases, like this all are primarily the reducing gases, and our Earth was primarily reducing in the beginning. So methane, ammonia, and hydrogen gas, if we give in a fixed proportions, and because of volcanic eruption, because of the thunderstorms, which we replicate in the form of electrode, if we give that, primarily we may get some kind of organic molecules. Now here, if you see, except the methane, mostly they are inorganic molecules. So creation from inorganic molecules to organic molecule in the lab itself was a huge thing for any experiment to progress forward in the evolutionary theory. So in the trap, they saw nucleotides. In the trap, they saw amino acid being synthesized. So that was the theory of abiogenesis, which was, giving some more substantiated formula. So yeah, early Earth, as I mentioned, that in the early Earth, we have a lot of volatile activities which was going on and completely reducing, having no oxygen at all. And in today's era also, we see that in absence of oxygen, there are a lot of organisms which grow. For example, you will look into the extremophiles, right? The thermophiles, the microorganisms, right? They are still growing, in the absence of oxygen. So in particularly when we talk about the abiogenesis theory, so primarily formation of bacteria was the primary thing which might have happened from a protocells. That was a theory, right? And what makes them into much more diversified era, okay? How the diversification actually happened from this reducing atmosphere. If you think about the reducing atmosphere in today's era, we will not survive, obviously, because most of us are, all of them of us are, living in the oxygen, right? But we have been evolved. Our ancestors were not, taking oxygen. So yeah, thermophile, acidophiles, alkaliphiles, halophiles, these are all primitive. You can see still they are present in the deep hydrothermal vents in the volcanic eruptions, you will see them actually actively growing there, right? So we do have. And then the event which came, which diversified everything, and it was great oxygenation event. So they scavenge what you call carbon dioxide, and then they start releasing a byproduct which is called as oxygen. So who did that? So there was cyanobacteria, as we know that. This is one of the prokaryotic organisms. So once cyanobacteria come into the picture of evolution, everything got so diversified and happened so quickly. It was so quickly that some of the organisms which were previously living in the absence of oxygen now completely become extinct. And oxygen is something which we should not be very proud of, because oxygen causes aging because of the free radical which they form. So that free radical is actually causing the DNA mutations, right? And because of that, the aging process, rusting of the iron, lot of different oxidizing process which we see in day-to-day life, it create a lot of chemical reactions when the oxygen came into the picture. So it was a great twist in the story of evolution when oxygen reached into the atmosphere, right? Yeah, as I was telling you, the mutation. Now, the concept was about variations through progress, how the transfer of characters are being passed, right? But this particular term called as mutation, and that is very random, right? It creates a diversified organism in planet Earth, right? Now, we don't see a kind of linear chain. We see diversified tree of life because of this particular process called as mutation, which is genetic changes in the organism, right? The genetic means the software of the cells are now getting changed or modified. So yeah, now the question is evolution, do you think it's a linear process? Uh, like this kind of pictures you normally see in different websites, right? Is it true? And if it is true, then the question arises, if we evolved from monkeys, why monkeys are still there then, right? And here is the concept that it's a completely wrong interpretation of evolution, right? Evolution is not linear, okay? It is by a tree of life, like some random mutation in one point which makes them to diversify. There are a lot of theories behind it. Some says that it is allopatric speciation, right? Where a geographical land is being, completely divided into, and then in between there's mountain or rivers, and then because of the two different kind of environmental situations, the organism need to modify them, they need to survive over there, right? Which makes the diversification much more easier for the organisms in the billions years of evolution. So yeah, even in case of humans, right? In the humans, it's not like that we are coming from chimpanzees, right? It's a family tree, as you can see. We do have a primary ancestors, right? And that ancestor diversified when they migrated from place to place. And then from there on, you see different type of primates which come into the picture. So we can't say that we are coming from the chimpanzees. Chimpanzees are our one of the line of the primates, and we are the ones. And interestingly, in humans also have lines, right? We have Neanderthal, right? We, though all our ancestral humans and human ancestry are dead, except the Homo sapiens, right? We do have Neanderthal, we do have Australopithecus, right? We have seen human evolution also. So those kind of lines, Neanderthal, again, a very interesting story of evolution of humans. So we see that human of all the different type of, human lines, we are still existing. Rest of them, they had different theory to prove that how they got extinct from the planet Earth. So yeah, this is the tree of life. And yes, what causes the diversification I have just mentioned: mutation, natural selection, geographical isolation, adaptive radiation. So adaptive radiation means like Darwin's finches. It is adapting and radiating into different places. They adapt there, and then they start living over there and forms the generation of species, the generation line of the same species, right? And of course, yes, environmental changes. So final conclusion, what are the evidences? They will ask you, I mean, the people who don't believe in evolution, like for example, 17% of the Americans don't believe in evolutionary theory. If you look into India, 69.8% believe in evolution, but rest of them, they have, a kind of question mark that yes, evolution is there. It's in the science book, but is it true, right? So if to prove them that evolution is a fact, it's not just a random theory which we have created out of nowhere, right? So which are those evidences? Let's try to get into it. So we do have the primary evidence, fossil evidence. By radioactive dating, we can actually figure it out that how much is the billions years of year, how it is actually was present over there, right? So one of them is tiktaalik. Now the connecting link between a fish and the land ancestor, right? So there was a missing link, and that missing link was filled by when they found the fossil of tiktaalik. Okay, it is a tetrapod fish. So now we see lungfish, right? The lungfish, and now it is moving from the aquatic world to the land, and then you see that the tiktaalik fossils are being found. And yes, who don't know about this picture? This picture is so famous, Archaeopteryx, right? A connecting link between the birds and reptiles, right? So you can see that there are some missing link. There are also connecting links, which actually takes us to say that, okay, we might have evolved from something, right? So we do have some proof where how do we evolve. Yeah, then comparative anatomy, we do have homologous organs like this. Like we do have a common ancestor, which says that all the structurally we are same, but functionally we might have changed because of adaptive radiation. We might move to different places, and those structures are changed to a particular form so that those functions are being properly performed. We have analogous organs where different from different places, different organisms come, and for the survival they have a common functionality. For example, insect of wing and bird wing together, common functionality is just to fly. Then vestigial organs, yes, wisdom tooth, right? So wisdom tooth, why it's called as wisdom tooth? Because it start appearing at the age of 17 to 25, right? And 17 to 25 is the age where you can see we do have intelligence and wisdom, and that's why it's called as wisdom. Primarily, our ancestor might have long jaws, and for the long jaws, this wisdom teeth provide an additional support, right? And then over the period of time, you don't require the wisdom teeth, so it's not there useful for anymore. Then we have coccyx or tailbone, right, which is present over there in the vertebral column at the last point, coccyx. Now that's vestigial organ, right? Interestingly, we do have something called as atavism. Now you might have thinking that, okay, tail was there, now it is not there. But what exactly is atavism? Says that the structure which might have gone completely in the evolutionary thing might come to prove that yes, it was there, right? So you can see in the atavism the reoccurrence of the extinct organ which come to the picture. Here's the tail, you can see it grows from there. And yes, embryological evidence we do have, the Ernst Haeckel, right? So here, as you can see, different organisms, if you look into the embryological point of view with respect to vertebrates have, if you look into the first picture line, you will say that I don't understand that which is what, right? Until they grow anatomically and morphologically, if they change by different kind of genetic regulations, then you can see that, okay, fine, now I can recognize some of the things, right? So our primary ancestors, if you look, it is almost the same, right? Then yes, biogeographical evidence, like camels, you see in different places, the anatomical features of camels, they change. Might be a common ancestors which move to different, migrated to different places, and then they start changing there. So the Darwin's concept, closely related species occupy different environment, right? So that is again we can see. Yeah, the adaptive radiation of Darwin finches also, like why the bird changes their beaks reaching to different places. And yes, primarily who will deny for the crime? If for the crime we are using DNA, why not for the evolutionary theory, right? So for the evolutionary theory, we do have the sequences, and those sequences, nobody can deny that the sequence change or the gene changes over the period of time between any two similar resembling species have been modified in certain places, right? So this is again one of the important evidence for evolution. And in today's modern time, what is the role of evolutionary studies? So these are some of the nature papers which I have just figured it out that in recent, I mean, in 18th June, today is what? Today is 21st June. In 18th June, there was one report which says massive Pakistani genome study reveals thousands of naturally inactivated genes. So the study of the genes, human population, organisms, how they evolved, which are the genes which are inactive, which are not, which are becoming inactive to active. Those kind of evolutionary, studies are extremely important for future development. Okay, then ancestor of eukaryotic cell contain a mix of genes from various microbes. I mean, this is very pretty sure when we have learned about the endosymbiont theory, right, by Margulis. It says that the mitochondria and the chloroplast were actually bacteria, right? And they still are there having the symbiotic relationship with us. So genes specifically can, all this endosymbiotic theory are possible because of the evolution which actually happened, right? And in today's generation, who will not give an importance to this very important genetic tool called as CRISPR-Cas, right? So now here an interesting thing about CRISPR-Cas. CRISPR-Cas, we know that it's a gene editing tool, right? So if you want to modify a particular gene, now let's look into the artificial selection, right? So artificial selection, which was happening before, it was domesticated thing, right? It was not in the genetic level, but still that was some changes. It was happening over the period of time. Now, CRISPR-Cas made that artificial selection become so much faster, right? So artificial gene editing tools are extremely important for what changes or modifying this particular crops, right? Now, the ethical part of CRISPR-Cas, how it is being used, is still a question mark, right? But evolution, if you look, if you want to progress, if you want to delete some of the genes which are there from a very long evolutionary period of time, and if you can delete it, the probably, possibly some of the disease which was happening in the generation, it might be completely eradicated. So that's again a medical, significance if you look into the evolutionary theory. And possibly in the poultry or the KFCs, you might get a six-legged hen, though ethically wrong, right? It's ethically wrong picture. I think in China they have published this picture in KFC, and then suddenly the government was very critical about that issue, that why a fake or morph picture of this. But in the future time, we don't know that this can change. Normal two-legged hen become six-legged hen because of rapid CRISPR-Cas tool, gene editing tool. Yeah, this is the phylogenetic tree. We know that we have learned in the bio that the bacteria, archaea, eukaryotes, okay, they are coming from a common ancestors, and then eukaryotes, they further diversified, bacteria diversified, archaea diversified. All these three domains of life is still now evolving, right? And yes, some of the unresolved question I would be pondering upon for discussion, that how did, we still don't know that, how did life first originate, right? What was the last universal common ancestor? And that's why I put a lot of question mark over there. And how common is life in the universe, right? And how do major evolutionary innovations are arising, and why do some species remain relatively unchanged for millions of years, like this horseshoe crabs? We do have horseshoe crabs, we do have the extremophiles, which does not change much over the period of time. So why is that? Why, what makes them to completely avoiding the evolutionary line is a very interesting question in the field of evolutionary biology, right? So with this, I mean, I would like to conclude this, that evolution is a journey, but not a destination. As a human, we are still evolving. After millions of years, we don't know that we will be in this particular state of anatomical or morphological feature, or we would have something else. So we are in a journey, and probably we don't know. There is no destination as such in when we talk about the story of evolution. Right. So I'll open the forum for any doubts and discussion. If any questions are there, please feel free to ask questions. I will be happy to, if I know the answer, because it's so uncertain. But if I have the answers, I'll definitely try to get it. Thank you.
Hi, all, we are open for questions. You can either unmute your mic and speak, or you can put your questions in the chat box.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
Yes.
Hi. My name is Kiran. I'm speaking from Abu Dhabi, actually. I
Yes.
have one question and one question to the organizer. Okay, the
Sure.
first question. You ever visited Galapagos Island? Any chance to visit? I heard about the birds over there. They don't have fear for humans, so
Okay.
they simply come
Okay.
and sit on the hands. The second
Hmm.
thing, it's a general question to the organizers, because yesterday only I came to know about this group and I joined in this WhatsApp
Hmm.
group, like yesterday's session and today's section. It is excellent. I will be attending most of the upcoming sessions. I just want to know who is the organizer and how the structure work. I'm really curious. I just know the name from the group. That's it. I don't know anything about the organizers. But the first question is to you, sir. Is
Hmm.
there fearless birds? Did you witness them or not? Thank you, sir.
I yes, thank you for the question. Personally, I did not visit the Galapagos, so if they are fearless, I mean, the humans for tourism, how much it is there, that is one point we have to see. That if the humans are not doing any kind of unwanted activities over there, so probably I don't think the birds or any other creature would be that much fearful to humans. So in that part of question, I have little bit of gap or knowledge of gap in that whether the human activities now at present are happening at a very rapid rate or not. That may clarify the your doubt.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Yeah, thank
Okay, let me answer the other question really quick. So, Biorex is actually a biology community. We conduct currently we are conducting sessions on Saturdays and Sundays. On Saturdays, we will be having expert talks, and on Sundays, if any one of you is interested in to talk about a specific topic or share your views about a specific topic, you can register for Biorex Biotalk session. So we will be having upcoming sessions too every Saturday and Sunday. I hope that clears your session, and everything will be updated in our WhatsApp group and other social media handles. Thank you.
Okay, okay. So, which part of India this organization is based in, or it's just virtual?
It's virtual, but most of the admins are from Kerala itself.
Thank you, thank you. I'll be attending all the sessions.
Yeah, I got a question here. Which type of mutation synonymous or non-synonymous lead to evolution? So, if you look into the synonymous kind of mutation, primarily they are the cause because they change the amino acid sequence, right? If you look into the non-synonymous, it's actually not causing major difference, right? So. I mean, synonymous. They synonymous. They do not change the amino acid sequences much. So I would say non-synonymous. Sorry about it. Non-synonymous probably would be having more rapid chances of getting the evolution because they change the amino acids. I hope it answers your question.
Are there any more questions? So, since there are no more questions, can we conclude
Yes.
today's session?
Yeah. Thank you so much. I mean, all the listeners over here who
Okay. As we come to the end of today's Biotalk session,
also
I
the
would like to
organizer
extend my sincere gratitude to our speaker,
gave me
Mr.
this
Saurav
opportunity
Mahajan, for
to
delivering
interact.
such a
Thank you.
hello. Okay.
Yes,
As
ma'am.
we come to the end of today's session, I would like to extend my sincere gratitude to our speaker, Mr. Saurav Mahajan, for delivering such an engaging and insightful talk on Galapagos Islands and the story of evolution. Today, we explored one of the most significant places in history of biology and gained a deeper understanding of how Galapagos Islands shape our knowledge of evolution, adaptation, and biodiversity. Your ability to connect scientific concepts with real world